Rory McIlroy just walked away from the most important player seat at the PGA Tour's table, and what he said on his way out is the most honest thing anyone has said about this tour in 2 years. He did not quit. He said he needed a reset. Those are not the same thing, and Rory knows it. This is not about one player getting tired of committee meetings. The PGA Tour's new commercial model has been in negotiation for over 18 months, and the player who volunteered more of his own time and credibility to defend it than anyone else on tour just publicly said he has nothing left to give. 48 players on LIV are watching this, every unsigned free agent is watching this, and every sponsor with a check on the table is watching this.
Honestly, I think Rory's exit from that council is the single clearest signal we have gotten that the tour's new model is in worse shape than the official statements admit. Do you agree, or am I wrong? Drop it in the comments right now. And stick around, because what Rory said specifically about trust inside the tour is the part the mainstream golf press glossed over completely, and I am not getting to it until later. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what Rory McIlroy actually gave to this process, because it was not nothing. When the PIF framework deal first became public in June 2023, the announcement blindsided most PGA Tour players. They had not been consulted. They had not been warned. They found out their tour was in commercial negotiations with the Saudi sovereign wealth fund backing LIV Golf from the same news alerts the rest of us got. The backlash from the locker room was immediate and genuinely angry.
Rory stepped in. He sat in congressional hearings. He gave press conferences defending a deal he openly admitted he had questions about. He stayed on the Player Advisory Council through months of stalled negotiations, framework revisions, deadline extensions, and a board restructuring that removed the player directors who had been there from the start. He kept defending the process when other players had already given up on it. Here is what that actually cost him. Rory played 14 events on the PGA Tour in 2022. In 2023, the year he was most publicly involved in the framework negotiations, he played fewer competitive rounds in the back half of the season than in any comparable stretch of his career. The political work was real work, and it came out of somewhere.
So when Rory McIlroy, the player who stuck around longest and gave the most publicly, stood in front of a microphone and said, "I feel like I need a little bit of a reset. I've given everything I can to this, and I feel like I need to take a step back," that was not a tired man taking a vacation. That was a man telling you, in careful language, that what he got back for what he gave was not enough. The tour's official response called it a personal decision and moved on. But none of that compares to what Rory said about trust inside the organization when he thought the formal cameras were done rolling. That is coming up.
Let me tell you who Rory McIlroy actually is in the context of this story, because his credential matters here. He is the most commercially important active player on the PGA Tour right now. Not Scottie Scheffler, who is the best golfer. Rory. He is the one whose face appears on the tour sponsorship decks. He is the one broadcasters want in the final group, because his presence moves the needle on overnight ratings in a way that even Scheffler does not replicate yet. The tour's relationship with its international partners, its streaming deals, its apparel and equipment ecosystem, all of it is easier to sell with Rory McIlroy visibly committed to the product.
He is also, and this part matters, Irish. He cannot be absorbed into American nationalism the way some of his peers can. He exists in a global commercial context, and that makes his public position on the tour's direction something that European sponsors, DP World Tour partners, and international broadcast rights holders all pay attention to. Think about what it would take for you to publicly say you need to step back from something you spent 2 years defending. Not quietly, in a press conference, with your name on the statement. Most people in that position say everything is fine and stop returning calls. Rory did the opposite. He said it plainly, in public, and let the discomfort sit there.
What he said on the record goes further than the reset quote. In a 2024 press conference, McIlroy told reporters directly, "I think what would have given players more confidence is if they were told what was happening before it became public." That sentence is about the June 2023 announcement. He is telling you the tour's leadership did not trust its own players enough to warn them before going public with the biggest commercial decision in the organization's history. That is not a complaint about a meeting he was left out of. That is a statement about the fundamental relationship between the people running the tour and the people playing it. The players built this tour. The suits announced it was for sale without asking them first.
Rory said that, on camera, and the tour let the news cycle move on within 48 hours as if he had said nothing at all. Is Rory right that the tour's leadership owes players a fundamentally different level of transparency? Or is that the kind of consultation that only sounds reasonable until you actually try to negotiate a billion-dollar commercial deal in real time? Tell me in the comments. And just when it looked like this was a story about one player's frustration with a process, somebody inside the tour's own power structure said something that reframes everything Rory is describing. I will get to that.
Now here is the part nobody is talking about. You are watching this and thinking Rory's problem is with the PIF deal specifically. It is not. His problem is structural, and if you miss that, you miss why this keeps happening to the PGA Tour no matter who is negotiating what. The PGA Tour's governance model was not designed for the commercial environment it now operates in. It was designed for a member-owned, non-profit sports organization, running tournaments and distributing earnings to players who technically qualified as independent contractors. That model worked for decades because the competitive threats were manageable and the revenue streams were predictable. Then, LIV arrived with sovereign wealth money, bought the attention of 50-plus players, and forced the PGA Tour into a negotiation that the organization's governance structure was never built to handle cleanly. The player directors who were added to the board in 2022 were supposed to fix this, give the players a real seat, give them visibility into commercial decisions before they became public, create the kind of trust that would keep the best players from looking at an LIV offer as their only real alternative. That restructuring lasted about 14 months before 3 of those player directors were quietly removed in the 2023 board shakeup.
Here is the number that explains why. The PGA Tour's board has 15 seats. After the restructuring, players controlled 4 of them. 4 out of 15, in an organization that would not exist without the players whose names sell the tickets, the sponsorships, and the broadcast rights. When the framework deal negotiations got serious, the commercial and legal decisions were being made by 11 people who were not players, advised by 4 people who were. And when those 4 player directors raised concerns, the answer was apparently not satisfying enough, because 2 of them eventually stepped back. Rory was not on the board. He was on the Player Advisory Council, which is a different thing. Advisory means they can be consulted and then ignored. The council has no vote. It has no binding authority over commercial decisions. It is the organizational equivalent of a suggestion box that the board reads when convenient. Rory spent 2 years putting his credibility and his time into a suggestion box. So here's the question nobody in the mainstream golf press is asking directly. If the advisory council has no real power, and the player directors had 4 seats out of 15, what mechanism was ever supposed to prevent the June 2023 announcement from happening exactly the way it happened?
Not everyone thinks Rory's frustration with the process is as serious as it looks. Tiger Woods has been the most consistent defender of the tour's general direction through all of this. He has publicly said the framework deal, whatever form it eventually takes, is better for the sport than the alternative of an indefinite war between 2 competing circuits that splits the field, confuses fans, and weakens every event by making the full roster of the world's best players unavailable in one place. His position, stated clearly in multiple public appearances, is that this process is ugly and slow, but moving in the right direction. Think about Tiger's perspective from where he sits. He has watched the sport fragment before, on a smaller scale, during the early years of the LIV threat. He saw what happened in the 1990s when the European and American tours had serious enough friction to affect player schedules and event fields. He is operating from a long-game framework that Rory, who is 34 and in the prime of his career right now, cannot afford to share. Tiger is already thinking about the sport in 10-year blocks. Rory needs the product working in the next 2 years.
Even Tiger's defense has a gap in it, though. Is Tiger right that the slow, messy process is still the correct process? Or has it dragged on long enough that the players defending it are now doing more damage to the tour's credibility than the deal itself? Drop your take below. Tiger's argument assumes the process eventually produces a result that the players can live with. What Rory's exit from the council suggests is that the players most invested in that outcome have started to question whether the process is actually designed to produce one. Defending the existence of a negotiation is not the same as defending the terms, and Tiger has not been public about the terms. Rory has been sitting in the room watching them develop. Those are not the same position.
Here is why the next 12 months make all of this considerably worse before it gets better. The PGA Tour's current media rights deal with CBS and NBC runs through 2030, but the internal discussions about what the commercial model looks like after 2030 are already happening, because you do not renegotiate a deal of that size in a year. Those conversations are taking place right now in parallel with the unresolved PIF framework situation, and the people in those rooms need to be able to tell media partners what the tour's product actually looks like going forward. Is it a standalone American circuit? Is it a combined global entity with live events integrated? Does it include the DP World Tour more formally? Nobody in those broadcast rooms can get a clean answer because the tour cannot give one. Sponsors are already reading this uncertainty into their commitments. Not all of them, and not publicly, but the quiet conversations about what happens after current sponsorship cycles end are being shaped by the fact that nobody knows what the PGA Tour will structurally be in 5 years. There is a direct historical comparison here. When the original World Golf Championship Series launched in 1999, the uncertainty about which players would play which events under what schedule created 2 years of sponsorship hesitation before the structure clarified enough for brands to commit long-term money. That was a much smaller commercial disruption than what is currently happening. The hesitation cost the tour real dollars that took years to recover. If you are a brand deciding right now whether to renew a title sponsorship deal on a PGA Tour event, and the player who has been the most visible public face of the tour's future just said he needs a reset from the process of building it, what number do you put in the renewal offer?
Step back from Rory and from the framework deal entirely, because this is not actually a story about one negotiation going badly. This is a story about an organization that spent 50 years running a successful sports business by making the players feel like insiders while structurally keeping them on the outside of real decisions. That worked when the players had nowhere else to go. The moment a competitor showed up with enough money to make leaving a genuine option, the whole arrangement started coming apart at exactly the seam everyone in the tour's leadership chose not to reinforce. The players always knew they were tenants. LIV just handed them a deed. Rory McIlroy is not a radical. He is not a player who went looking for a fight with the tour's administration. He is the player who stayed, defended, testified, and counseled, and then stood in front of a microphone and told you in plain language that the experience left him with nothing left to give. If that player is depleted, you need to ask hard questions about what the organization took from him without reciprocating. The tour's new commercial model may still work. The framework deal may eventually close. The broadcast rights may lock in and the sponsorship uncertainty may resolve. But the governance model that produced the June 2023 announcement without warning the players, that gave player directors 4 seats out of 15, that built an advisory council with no binding authority, and then watched its most committed member burn out in public, is still the same governance model that will be running whatever version of the tour exists in 2030. And here is what nobody at tour headquarters wants to say out loud. The players who stayed and defended this process through 2023 and into 2024 did so because they believed their credibility was being traded for something real, a genuine seat, real authority over decisions that affect their careers. What they got instead was an advisory role that asked for their public support and gave them limited structural power in return. Rory cashing out of that arrangement is not a personal story, it is a data point. And when your most bankable, most publicly loyal defender tells you he is out of gas, you do not respond with a press release about respecting his personal decision. You fix the thing that burned him out. Is this a fixable governance problem? Or is the tour structurally incapable of genuinely sharing power with the players who make its product worth watching? Tell me below.
Here is where this lands. Rory McIlroy said publicly he has given everything he can and needs a reset. That sentence from that player at this moment in the tour's commercial history is the most expensive admission the organization has received in years, and they have not addressed it publicly in any specific way. My honest verdict? The tour does not have a deal problem right now. It has a trust problem, and deal problems get solved with money. Trust problems get solved by changing how you treat people, which is considerably harder and requires admitting something went wrong. The next video I'm dropping is about what the PIF framework talks actually look like from inside the room right now, who is still at the table, and whether the deadline everyone is watching is real or another extension in different language. That one is worth your time. Subscribe so you catch it when it drops.